right, for this next section of GBLP, we're going to talk about establishing culture and how some folks do it successfully and how some folks do it very unsuccessfully. So that you, when you're starting your business or, growing that team and wanting to really establish that culture as it moves away from kind of the coffee table type discussion and more, you don't know everybody, you're not on that personal level with everyone on your team. That's where the culture becomes really important. And so establishing that culture inside of your organization is crucial to sustaining your growth through that next phase of your business. So the first piece that I want to talk about, excuse me, when it comes to establishing culture, is where does culture come from? And I think this is a really natural question. What is culture? It's kind of that weird thing in business where it touches all these different areas, but like, what is it actually? How do you put your hands on it? And I think the best way to think about it, and I know this is also something that's a little bit abstract and hard to put your hands around, but trust me, to help you out, is think about it just like a country. Where does America's culture come from? Where does Mexico's culture come from? Canada, Germany, the UK, whatever it is, they all have their own unique culture. And where does that come from? Just like inside of a business, it comes from their environment, right? Your culture is going to be heavily based on what type of environment you have in the business. If you are remote working, if you are in a sunny room, if you are working at an office on the beach, they're all going to cater to slightly different types of cultures because they're going to cater to different types of behaviors in your team. And those behaviors, those actions that people are taking are where that culture comes from. That's one piece where the culture comes from. The other piece is the history and traditions. And, in the country context, this makes a lot of sense for very old countries. But for newer businesses and that growing team example, I like to use the example more of if you think back to the founding fathers of America, where we're a much younger country, and they really tried to set the standard for what the country was going to be. They tried to establish a culture through a lot of very specific rhetoric in the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, right? So by establishing some of that rhetoric, just like you may with your mission statement, or anything like that inside of your business, company values, pillars of success, anything like that, whatever you want to call it, that helps to establish some of that rhetoric for your team, right? And so that rhetoric is part of where that comes from. And if you don't have any histories or traditions, then you really need to spread that out. But for older, more established companies, that does play more of a role as far as they actually have a history, right? The next piece is language. Now, of course, when you think about a country, they're talking about actual language, speaking German, speaking Dutch, speaking Spanish, whatever it is, right? But inside of your business, the way I would think about it is language in terms of just the way you talk. Are you very casual, super formal? Anything like that, any manner of which you're speaking, how you communicate with your team is going to establish that culture for your team. If you are somebody who is kind of brash, maybe even almost rude, very short with your team, then your team is probably going to wind up having a kind of short culture with each other, if you will, where they're kind of not necessarily being full on rude, but they're not being very nice. Whereas if you're somebody who is very personable, taking the time to have good conversations with everybody and really connect and understand where people are coming from when you're having discussions, then your team is going to embody that as well. Everything you do as a leader kind of spreads out into the culture like that. And language is a really specific example of that, where the way you speak, everyone in your organization is paying attention to it. I almost think about it like if you've ever been around a like 5 or 6 year old and they're learning all their new words and kind of learning the word around them, and you say, one swear word once, you're like, oh shit, they're going to pick up on that. And then guess what's in their dictionary now? That swear word, right? And so you have to think about that as well. Everything you're putting out, if you're being pessimistic, that pessimism is going into your company. That's where that culture comes from. The last piece that I want to talk about as far as where culture comes from is the social structure. So in the country, of course, classes, things like that, political structure, anything like that. In a business, it's your organizational structure. Do you have a flat hierarchy? Do you have something where you're very segmented and people are separated? Do you have a segmented business, but you have a lot of collaboration in between? Does you have the systems and processes in place for that? The way that you design the structure of your business is going to influence the culture. Because if people are separated, kind of like I was talking about in the, work from home, work online type of example, right? If people are separated, then they're going to have a habit of probably being a little bit more independent. If you are bringing people together all the time, then that culture of collaboration is going to take over. So that's where culture comes from. I think thinking about your business like a country is a great way to think about it. All of those different actions and rhetoric from everybody inside of the organization is what creates that culture. The culture kind of creates itself in that way. The next piece that I always want to talk about, talking about people that do it right and, things that people do wrong, is doing versus saying. And when it comes to this, The best example is the really like toxic leadership or really toxic management example that you see a lot in, corporate America, really big businesses and just, crappy managers, which is we're a family. Hey, we're a family here. We take care of each other. If you have to tell me we're family, that's not a good sign. I'd like to think that to, the idea of if you say honestly, that means you're lying everything else you're saying, right? Why are you trying to tell me that we're family? We should feel like family. I don't have to tell people that I'm family with my family. You can tell that we're family. We have a feeling about it, right? And that's exactly what happens inside an organization. That feeling, whether it's we are trusting, we are family, we take care of each other, whatever it is, if you're talking about it, that's not a very good sign. You need to be doing it, right? So there is this kind of balance of establishing the culture with the rhetoric. But if all you're doing is talking, then that rhetoric is going to fall on deaf ears. And so it's really important that not only are you talking the right things? You have this beautiful vision statement. You got your values, all that kind of stuff, right? That you do need for your organization. But then on top of that, it's really important that you follow it up by leading with it, or leading by example, rather. And by leading by example, you are going to help to establish that culture throughout your team. Think about it just like establishing a standard of when people are going to show up for work. They're coming in at 8 a.m. every day, right? Well, if you start showing up at 7:45, 7:30, well, that's going to start to bleed into the culture. Other people are going to start showing up early. If you are somebody who takes the time to bring in the rest of the team members, let's say you just have a team, 5 to 10 people, right? And whenever you have a really big decision, you bring people in together and you say, hey, let's talk about this. And you get everyone's opinion and you make sure you come up with the best course of action from that, right? Those same people, because you're doing that, that's establishing the culture of collaboration. And therefore, as their business grows and they have their own teams, guess what they're going to do? They're going to collaborate with them. They're going to bring those people together in order to get their opinion. Sorry, camera's a little out of focus there. But as you bring people together, and you're going to create that culture. All of these different things add up. Your business's culture is the summation of your actions and your rhetoric. The way you talk, the way you behave is going to build your culture. And this is why it's so important to understand how to lead yourself first. By leading yourself, by showing up for your team in a positive attitude, being a calming presence for your team, showing your team that you also are a lifelong learner. You're continuously trying to improve yourself and the organization. That establishes that culture for the rest of your team. And that's how you really create that high performing team, is through that culture. But the culture can't happen without the leader. The leader has to lead themselves. The leader has to be that example. And the leader has to be a good enough example that it inspires people to follow that example, right? If you are showing up early, but you're kind of a jerk, your team doesn't really like you, they don't necessarily believe in the vision, the business, all that kind of stuff, well, they're not going to show up early, right? If you're showing up early and you're like, we're a family, if you're playing that game, they're not going to show up early because they think you're trying to trap them, right? So it's about being the person that they can believe in and leading by example with that. And that is really how you establish culture inside of a team, whether it's a small team or a business that's growing and you're hiring and bringing out those new people, kind of leaving that coffee table level like we were talking about earlier. That's really where it comes from. It all goes back to the leader. So the most important piece of culture is understand these different components, understand the mix of the actions and the rhetoric, but then at the end of the day, lead by example, and that's how you establish a culture in your team. So thanks for watching. For more free excerpts from GBLP, check out our YouTube channel. And then if you are interested in signing up for GBLP, our Green Beret Leadership Program, and you want to develop great leaders inside of your team, then go to www.10xyourteam.net/GBLP. Check it out, schedule a free call with us, learn how GBLP can help you to create a team of leaders and what that does, and how that can 10x your team. Thanks again. I'll see you guys in the next video.